This is the Youth Soccer Revolution Podcast, episode number 24. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Youth Soccer Revolution Podcast. Very happy to be here again with you guys. Thank you for joining me. Today, I have an awesome guest by the name of Santino Quaranta. Many of you might remember him from playing with the U.S. men's national soccer team. Also played 11 seasons in the MLS with DC United, Galaxy, and Red Bulls. Great interview. Santino had a lot to share with us, and I really appreciate him coming on and sharing his journey with us. A lot of great stuff here for you guys, so I'm just going to get right into it. Just a quick few things about Santino. As mentioned before, he played in the MLS. Did not attend college as he was with the U.S. U17 national team at the IMG Soccer Academy in Bradenton, Florida. But eventually he was drafted in the 2001 MLS Super Draft by DC United. At that time, he was the youngest player ever drafted by an MLS team at 16 years and 4 months. Santino went on to be a founding board member of Pipeline Soccer Club. You can find more information about Santino at pipelinesoccerclub.com. Again, guys, tons of great information here from Santino. Thank you so much for being on here. I'm going to set up a PDF that you can download with all the highlights of the interview, and you can find those at youthsoccerrevolution.com. Welcome back to the Youth Soccer Revolution Podcast. This is Ernesto Diaz, your host. Today, I'm joined by Santino Quaranta. Santino was signed by MLS at only 16 years old. He was the youngest player at that time. He played 11 seasons as a professional, mostly with DC United. He also attended the IMG Academy. Also had 15 caps for the U.S. men's national team. So, Santino, I've told our listeners just a little bit about you, but why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about you so we can get to know you personally?
Yeah, first off, thanks, Ernesto, for having me. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, kind of a hotbed for soccer, especially 15, 20 years ago, especially the area that I grew up in Baltimore City, real Italian-oriented, very just a lot of soccer players, and that's what we did from a real young age. I grew up kind of in the city, so across the street from my house was a soccer field, and it had a blacktop and grass, and it was all my buddies. I was the youngest guy, and I always played with the older kids, and they kind of took me under their wing, and I loved the game. And I think that's what really, in the end, what made me the type of soccer player that I am. In saying that, I think that the country's changed a little bit, and the dynamics have changed because I don't see that as much anymore, just the street level playing because you love it, no structure at all, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 4-on-4, playing for really pride. There was no trophies involved. It was you played because you loved it, and I really appreciate the structure and everything that's changed in the country today. But on the flip side, I think if it was a little bit more, unstructured, and kids just go out and play and have the ability to just bring a ball, and there's no uniforms, there's no anything. It was take your shirt off, shirts and skins type thing, and that's where I grew up, and that's where I learned about the fight and the grit and the mentality of winning and appreciating the game for what it is. That really the level of where it's all about the love of the game, and it's not about what shirt you have on or who you represent, because you represent yourself.
Mm-hmm. Santino, in one of your interviews after you retired, you mentioned that you didn't know what you were going to do anymore because you had been playing since you were 5 years old. You had been a soccer player. So take us back to when it first started. Tell us, how did you get into it? Was it you started playing on your own? Did your parents sign you up? Take us back and tell us and walk us through how it all got started.
My family was very intricate in obviously how I developed and how I started to play the game. My father and my uncle, they were magic. They were great players themselves. my grandfather was a great athlete, great soccer player, and my introduction to the game was basically that's what I saw at 2, 3, and 4 years old. I saw my father playing, my uncle playing, all their friends playing, and you couldn't take a ball away from my feet. My mom used to tell me, and I remember that she remembers giving me a ball, and that was the end of it because I couldn't get it off my feet, and I loved it. And like there was no signing me up for anything really because I felt like I was tuned in from the minute I got the ball, and like I just said, where I grew up, it wasn't loads of money. It wasn't about anything like that. It was at the root, the grass level, the roots were just to go over and across the street and play. And obviously as I started to get a little older, it was more structured and organized with the club teams and starting to get introduced at 8, 9, and 10 years old to my club team, which went on to be, we were a dynasty. But the start of it and the grassroots level was my friends that I grew up with 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, that I still remain friends with those guys today because that was the key focal point of why I was so successful. And like I said, it'd be hard for me to even explain what that looked like in Hollandtown in Baltimore because it was out of it. Today it should be made into a movie because it was 100, 200 kids playing soccer in a school lot. And you don't see that anymore, And we played until the street lights came on and we would play in the street. And the cars would even know that we were playing a game, so they'd have to go a different route, That kind of stuff doesn't happen today, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned, again, so much good information there, Santino. I mean, when you said you were 5 years old, when you were doing the interview, you mentioned, since you were 5, you meant that generally, like, around 5, but basically you had started playing since you could walk, like your parents said.
Yeah, that was when I first was introduced to it. And at 5, 6, 7, I was playing with kids that were, I remember my mom telling me a story. At 5 years old, I was playing under 8 or under 9, and just was always fearless, and I'll take anybody on, and I loved having the ball at my feet, and I want to make the game, and that's what I try and teach the kids now is to be confident and fearless, and you got to take care of the ball when it's at your feet, and I think sometimes we get away from, we watch teams like Barcelona and all these guys, they pass the ball around, and it's such a beautiful game, but at the same time, those kids and those players that are on that field were extremely confident and comfortable with the ball, 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, with the ball at their feet, and that's what I try to tell young kids is to be fearless and to be confident and don't worry about making mistakes because there's, everybody makes mistakes. It's just, can you do it again? Can you continue to try and be fearless? And that's what I was taught, to have confidence. And so that's what I try to relay to young kids nowadays.
Yeah. And, another thing you mentioned earlier, you talked about your environment and how critical that was. And that's something that we try to promote here with our podcast is, creating that environment for the kids. Like you said, you were fearless. You had no worries about, doing something wrong. You were just out with your friends and just playing all the time. I mean, it sounds really interesting when you talk about, across the street from your house, how long you guys would play with your friends. And how much of an impact do you think that had on you as a player?
Well, it had everything to do with it. I look around nowadays and you have fathers and guys that don't know what they're talking about at the younger ages, at 5, 6, 7, and they're worried about winning games. And they're worried about, putting a trophy on their mantle. You know what I mean? And that's, for me, that's hard because I wish I could relay all this information to every soccer player in the country and give them a chance to experience what I experienced, And there's so much time in their careers, just like mine, to win games and be successful. But the base layer of, your foundation is so critical to a kid's development. It was so critical to mine. When I stepped on the field at RFK for the first time, it was just like I was playing across the street at the school lot. It didn't matter what it was, how many people were watching. Was I nervous? Of course I was a little nervous, but I always went back to my foundation, and that was playing 2-on-2 and 3-on-3, making my own T-shirt and pretending we were a certain team. And that's where I went off of my base. And the problem is nowadays is kids go back at their base. When you go back to your foundation, the first coach, how you're introduced to the game, is so critical. And I think that that's where this country is failing, and it lacks the leadership necessary. Is it changing? Absolutely. But I feel like the introduction of the game has to be the focal point of how we progress as a country.
Yeah, and you're definitely doing your part with your soccer club that you have, but then also by coming on here, Santino, and that's why we appreciate you coming on here, and that's the reason why we need to learn from you guys, you who've already been through it, and you've learned so much from it, and now you're sharing all this information with us, so we really appreciate it. And you discussed with your about your dad, and I believe you said your uncle, and they played, and you kind of looked up to them, and how big of an impact did that have on you? I mean, because it sounds like, you know, you were just kind of brought up in this environment, and they played, and they must have enjoyed it, and you saw that, and you wanted to be part of that.
Well, it's no secret, you know, the most successful athletes, you have to be pushed, and it's not always fun. You know, and if it was fun, then and it was easy and simple, everybody would be professional, right? It's not easy. You know, I was fortunate to have my dad, my uncle, push me along. You know, when kids are, you know, I was training when people were doing other things because I wanted to progress on and be a professional. Was it always easy? No. Sometimes it's difficult. But like I tell the kids nowadays, you know, it's easy to be good, but it's extremely hard to be great. And that's where the difference for me is I wanted to be great, and there's certainly sacrifices and there's things that have to be made to push on and to be a special talent. And then that doesn't mean that every player that comes through my organization at Pipeline is going to take the same path that I did. Everybody has different goals and different ambitions and different skill sets and different mentalities. And it's our job as, you know, especially for me as a coach, as a mentor for these kids, to recognize which ones have that ambition, which ones have the family backing, which ones have the right mentalities to say, you know what, this is what I want to do, whether it's to go on to high schools, college, or to be a professional and try and give them every outlet to be a professional or just try and match their goals because there's millions of soccer players now, you know, and there's not millions that have the right guidance. And that's where, like I said, I think that this country needs to get better. And it certainly is getting better. It's made tremendous strides. But I still think that there's a lack of leadership at the younger age groups at the, you know, at the foundation level.
Yeah, and you mentioned support, you mentioned guidance, again, just taking so much from your knowledge. You've already been through all this. So then you also mentioned all the sacrifices that a player has to make as well. Can you tell us some of the sacrifices you had to make to reach that high level?
I recognized early that I could play at 50% if I wanted to and still be the best player on the field. What I had to adjust to was understanding that if I played at 100% and always were pushed along, because as a kid, you know, you always look to take, you want to take games off. You want to take the easy route. Why do I have to play at 100% when I can do it at 50% and still score 2 or 3 goals, right? Mm-hmm. Why do I have to? And these are the sacrifices. You know, I moved to Bradenton at 14 years old, 13 years old, down to Florida at IMG, which was an incredible opportunity. But I had to leave everything behind, high school, friends, proms, dances, vacations, because that's where I was going. I was going to Florida to train, to go to a youth World Cup, and I was selected for that. And that was a hard thing personally and internally. From the outside looking in, it was an incredible opportunity, and everybody said, oh, this is so wonderful, and I appreciated it, and I understood. But I was still 14 years old, with no family, no nothing. And leaving everything behind to go on and do that. And that was a huge sacrifice, because, I was comfortable where I grew up. Like I said, I always went back to that foundation of that area and where I grew up, but at the same time, it was what I had to do, to become what I wanted to become, which was a professional, and all the sacrifices that I made at a young age, and throughout the summers and ODP and regional teams and traveling and, no vacations. It just wasn't in the cards for me at the time, and that's when I moved to Florida and trained every day and worked so hard. I had one thing at the end, the light was at the end of the tunnel. There was nobody who was going to stop me from being a professional because I had sacrificed. I was giving up so much.
Yeah, I don't think we take that into consideration sometimes when we're talking about a 14-year-old who has their friends, and then has to leave all that behind to go with another group of kids.
Yeah, look, for certain professionals and for certain players, I go back to the mentality and the attitude. There's so many great players that could certainly, the skill set's there, everything is there from a soccer standpoint, but it's not just about soccer. It's about the mentality, and it's about dealing with the emotions. And when you become a professional, when you walk out on the field for the national team, how do you deal with those emotions? And for me, I keep going back to the base and my foundation. I was told to embrace that stuff, so represent my area, that's where I belonged. And that was ingrained in my mind. So when I got to that point, when I played for the national team, when I was sitting on buses with Landon and even Claudio Reyna and guys like this in qualifiers, I embraced it, why? Because of the confidence and the arrogance of, me knowing that I belong there. And that was the environment that I always strived to be in. And when I made it there, it was something that I'll treasure for the rest of my life, because I'll never feel those emotions again. And there's nothing in this world that I can ever attest that to. Being on a bus, going to a qualifier, being in a different country in Costa Rica and playing against Costa Rica, and the things that went on. I can't even explain that, because it's something that you'd have to feel to understand. And people listen to this, if there is players that have experienced that, they'll understand exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, when you were talking about, that it's more than just soccer, I thought of two people I know immediately that came to me, that came to mind, and they had the qualities to be the skills to be a professional soccer player, but they didn't have the mentality, and that does make a difference, like you said.
I absolutely agree with you.
So let's move on. So you started playing, the environment around you, there was soccer around there. You kind of just fell into it. You started playing on your own. You said you started playing rec with your friends across the street. Then eventually you must have gotten into travel soccer. At what point was that?
Yeah, I was about 7, 8 years old, and it was much different back then. My team, we were excellent. We had a group of players that had great mentalities. I think 3 or 4 players from my club team went on to play in Major League Soccer at some capacity. Wow. We were a group of players that were fearless. It was a team that had special players in special positions, even at 8, 9, and 10 years old. We were in environments that were difficult in this region and nationally. And we were always felt like the Yankees. Every game we played, we learned very early that there was a big target on our back because of our talent level. And I think that set us up, at 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, to understand what it took game in and game out to fight, and to have an attitude of what this country right now is kind of built on is good work ethic, good fight. And it wasn't always the most beautiful soccer, but what had happened was it set us up to when we went on to bigger and better things at that, younger age, that we understood what it took to win, what it took to fight, what it took to have good attitudes as a team player. Because it just wasn't me. I was obviously a special talent, but I needed the guys around me to everybody do their job. And we went on to win regional championships and multiple state cups. And when I went to the league at 16, they played in national championships, my club team, and we stayed together for a lot of years. and that base of players and the friendships that was created, they're memories for a lifetime. And that's where I started at the Soccer Club of Baltimore. And like I said, we went on to do special things.
Mm-hmm. So what type of coaching did you receive as, let's say, between 6 and 8 years old?
Well, the coaching, my father was a big part of it. He was a big part of that group. He coached that group for multiple years. A lot of the coaching for me was obviously his guidance and everything else, but at 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, the coaching was done at the school lot, at the right across the street from my house. Of what the game is, by the older.
And you mean the street soccer? You mean
street soccer at a grassroots level. Now the tactical stuff, the structure, that was all done by my dad. But I keep going back to really the game in a nutshell is, for me, it's 1 versus 1. It's 2 versus 2. Mm-hmm. It's obviously the game is 11 versus 11, and there's so many tactical issues now, and there's so many genius coaches right throughout the world. But in the end, it comes down to one thing for me, and it's winning your battle 1 versus 1 on the field. Because we're all matched up really. It's not to where it's just 1 versus 1 battles, and when you're comfortable enough to run at players, to be confident, to know that you're going to win your battle, and that's how I learned the game, and that's a special way of learning the game, and I think that's not so much the case nowadays. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I agree, because that's what makes the difference. If you have a 2-on-2, but you have a special player that takes one of those guys 1-on-1, you now have a 2-on-1.
Sure.
So yeah, it does take those special players, like you said.
Yeah. So that's the base of it.
Yeah. So then let's move on to Bradenton, Florida. At what point, take us through the progression of how you ended up attending there.
So I was with the U14 national team. I was invited out to Chula Vista in San Diego, and I was doing some things with the youth national team at the Cocoa Beach, Florida. Went out to San Diego, and John Ellinger was the U17 national team coach at the time. He was coming out to San Diego to look at the rising group that was going to rise and go. Obviously, we were right after Landon and DeMarcus Beasley and that crew of guys that were successful. And so there was a lot of pressure on the next group that was incoming that was going to go to Bradenton. And John was a Baltimore guy. He was from the state of Maryland. And when I was in San Diego, it was one of the best weeks I've had, and just really felt comfortable. And that was kind of when I made my mark on the scene. And Eddie Johnson was my roommate. We were both selected to go down, and we became roommates when we moved down to Bradenton. So it wasn't long after that San Diego trip that we went down to Florida and were introduced to IMG, and our families kind of took us down, and the training environment and everything that was introduced to us was fantastic. But you had to grow up quick, because we went to school from 8 to about 12:30 or 1 o'clock, and we'd come back to our apartments, kind of dormitories, and we'd have training at 3 o'clock. And it was all in preparation, those 14 or 15 months down there, for the under-17 qualifying in World Cup.
And how long were you there for?
I think it was close to 18 months.
When you're there at the academy,
it was semester at a time. So they invited players down. It was kind of semester based from a school semester. So it had been from August to December, let's say. And if it didn't work out, then there was other players that they were going to bring in. 2 would be replaced, and 2 were going to come in. So 1 would be from Chicago, 1 would be from Dallas. Players that are always being evaluated. And there was constantly, we had a core group of guys that John wanted to build around. He was a fantastic coach. He was a fantastic father figure to me. And it's funny because now we do stuff in the youth, and we're working together here in Baltimore, because he works down in Columbia at SAC, big soccer organization, and I have Pipeline here in Baltimore. And so it's all come back, and he was excellent for what I needed and what we needed down there. So So it was some players rotating in and out, but it was a core group of guys that had to stay together because we wanted to build a team to win that World Cup.
Mhm. Yeah, and so you must have always kept performing because you stayed there for what, 2 years before you were drafted by MLS?
Yeah, I was. I was there for close to 18 months, and Major League Soccer we were always playing in front of, coaches and the heads of MLS because they'd come down for preseason. We would have some games against MLS teams, and all along they're watching you, and I started to really just take off as a player physically. I was fast and strong at that age, and it's not normal for a 16-year-old kid to have the success that I did my first year in Major League Soccer. But again, I didn't care who I was playing against. It wouldn't have mattered who it was. Because I was always taught that you have to believe that you're better, and I did. And we're just always going back to where I grew up and just hearing those guys' voices while I was playing, and that's where I always went back on.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to that confidence level that you had, that you talked about on the ball, and just being confident.
Absolutely.
So let's take us back to the day that you were drafted. Obviously, you were at that time you were the youngest player drafted in MLS history. Take us through some of the emotions. What were you going through? Did you know about this? I mean, tell us a little bit more about that.
What had happened was I signed with Major League Soccer Project 40, and the combine and everything. Went to the combine, and I had a great combine. I could sense that I was being touted as a top pick. DC United had no high draft picks in the first round leading up to it, in advance of it. And the night before the draft, they made some big trades, and they got 3 picks in the top 10, I think. And it was the same year that Ryan Nelson, who was the captain of Blackburn and played in England, he was at Stanford, so he was selected. I think Mark Lisi out of Clemson was selected, and I was selected in that top 10. So I had no idea I was going to go to D.C., which is about 30 minutes from Baltimore, so it was my hometown. So all along I thought that I was going to get drafted somewhere else, and it was just wherever. I didn't care where it was. It was a dream to be able to play, and the emotions were, like I said, I felt like I belonged. And as soon as I was drafted, whatever team it was, I wanted to go and start. And that was the mentality that I had. It was never just appreciating okay, it's good enough just to be here. Like, if I'm going to get this far, then I'm going to keep going as far as I can take it. And when I did get drafted, and fortunately I got drafted at DC United to be able to play in front of my friends and my family, and that really, once I got drafted there, it was over. I was going to show everybody how good I was, and it was an incredible journey to that point, and it was an amazing. Can't even tell you the emotions. I went up to the podium when my name was called, and I couldn't believe it. But I was appreciative. Thank God for everything that had happened, and then I just couldn't wait to play.
Yeah, I mean, that must have been an amazing feeling, and for those of us also that have never had the opportunity to represent our country, tell us what that feels like.
It's something that I tell you what, there's pride, there's appreciation, it's gratitude, it's nerves, it's when you see your name on the shirt, when you see the crest, the environment is tense. You have to perform, because at that level, it's all about representing your country, yourself, and performing. And if you don't perform, you're done. You're finished. There's a million other players that can come in. So it's not cut out for everybody. And that's why not everybody plays on the national team, because it's a whirlwind of emotions. You have to really believe in yourself. During the national anthem, you're in the starting lineup, and you're you just have these emotions of appreciation, and you think about the military and everything else in this country that we stand for, and that's something that, like I said earlier on, I'm never going to feel that again, and it's something that I'll never forget, and I appreciate, because I know 99.9% of the players will never feel that are in this country. It's such a small group, and it's something that it's incredible, and it's something I'll appreciate forever.
Yeah. I mean, but the emotions going through you when you're on the field and you're about to get started and the national anthem's on. I mean, wow, what an opportunity, though.
Yeah, something I'll tell my grandkids about, and my son and my daughter, they're able to watch. I scored in the Gold Cup at RFK in 2009, and it was actually on TV not too long ago. My little guy was watching it, and he's only 5 years old, but he saw me score, and that's something that they can never take away, and no matter what happens, being able to say I scored for my country at the highest level, and that's something that, like I said, I made it all worth it. And when I was done playing in the end, I knew that I accomplished a lot, and I was okay, and I was happy to move on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, you definitely had a distinguished career, so definitely have to be proud of that. Let's talk a little bit more about MLS, and obviously you spent quite some time there, about, is it 10, 11 years? How do you see the league right now? Where was it at when you were there?
It was in a fantastic place when I was there. It wasn't too long ago, 2011. I stopped, but it's in a great place right now. The level has increased. There's more high-profile players that are coming over. The fan base it's phenomenal. I'm fortunate enough to still be a part of DC United, and do the commentating for Comcast Sportsnet. And I'm still tied into the fans, and the passion and the knowledge has changed. And Major League Soccer is a brand that's so young still, 20 years, and they've accomplished so much from a business standpoint, and now from a player standpoint. Financially, guys are getting paid well. Their stadium's being built just here in D.C. Obviously, they announced that they're going to build a stadium downtown, and I think it's special to be one of, kind of the founders, the young guys that founded the league, and to be able to, look down the line 20 or 30 years from now and say, I was a part of that when it was 5 years old or 6 years old. And I can't say enough good things about the people who run the league, because it's not always easy. People want free agency. People want, Ronaldo to come here. But at the end of the day, it's a business, and it has to be done the right way. And I think that has been done the right way. Now you see Seattle, Portland, Toronto, all these different fan bases it's special. It's a special atmosphere, and it's only given opportunities for kids to look forward to and watch that stuff on TV. And it's really great for kids to be able to watch that and have an outlet later in life.
Do you think that's the same approach or the same feeling that most of the MLS players have, like you?
Sure, absolutely. I think that it's even more now because, you had the game of the week on ESPN when I was young, in 2001, 2002. Now you have, 30 games that are on TV. And you have access to watch it all, and kids get to look up to idols. And I remember going to a DC United game. I think it was in 96 or 97, and I'll never forget it. And I said, man, one day I want to walk out of the tunnel and play on that field. Now, these soccer-specific environments, it changes kids' lives. Maybe signing one autograph and changing a kid's perspective on giving them a dream it's excellent.
Yeah. And what do you think about the level of play? You think has increased or stayed about the same since the early 2000s?
Yeah, I think look, I think it's certainly more talented. I don't want to say. I played with Ben Olsen and Jaime Moreno and Marco Echeverri and you know, guys like that, Dima Kovalenko, Aleko Eskandarian, guys like this. I don't know if you can say today that there's better players on DC United, that the talent level is that much above it. What I would say is the science part of it, right? That's what's evolved. The scientific end of it, the way trainings are run, heart rate monitors, and everything else. It's just it's more of it's more of a science now. But I definitely think that it's a bigger group of talented players. How about that? You know, it's
okay. Yeah.
It's deep. It's deeper. It's deeper than just the 11 or 12 or 15 guys that you counted on throughout the season. But I wouldn't say that there's you know, crazy amounts of talent different than it was in '96 when guys like, you know, Eric Winalda and Alexi and those guys were playing. I mean, they'd still start today, right? I mean, it's so I think I think what's changed is how the game is perceived. The youth academies, the structure has changed, but from a talent standpoint, I don't think it's, look, you're not going to find a better midfielder on DC United or anywhere in this league than Marco Echeverri right now today.
Yeah. And at one point did you go play in India?
It was more of an ambassador role. I didn't end up going because there was some things with the government, but it was a great opportunity to go and see another place. It was, the ideas were really good from the founders of what they wanted to do, bring some older guys that have experienced a lot, to more of an ambassador role. And for the younger kids in India, it was a 6 or 8 week project, but unfortunately it never panned out, so we never got a chance to do it. But it was guys like Cannavaro and Hernan Crespo and, you know, special talents that were a little bit older, that were going to go and play and be introduced to different culture.
I see. And Santino, we're getting near the end of the interview. Again, I appreciate your time very much. But before we leave, is there anything that I didn't ask in regards to player development that you think it's important for parents to know, or coaches or players?
No, I think we could sit and talk for 2 hours about what I think about player development, you know. And I mean, the real firm points that I truly believe in is this country gets so caught up in winning and at 8, 9, 10 years old, parents on the sidelines, just, you know, winning at all costs, and coaches getting caught up into, you know, which we all want to win, right? We're based in a country that is result oriented, you know, and that's why there's shows like The Voice and American Idol, right? Because we want to see the winner at the end of it. But I think to even here in Baltimore, to look at some of the things that are going on outside our pipeline, an organization that myself and Sean Rush run, my partner, you look at teams and clubs that 9-year-old kids are training 5 and 6 days a week in a structured environment, which I think is absolutely ludicrous. There has to be a yearning and a want for the game. There has to be, you know, guidance and understanding that at 8, 9, 10 years old, they're not going to be professional players yet. They have to love the game when they're 16, 17, and 18 still, and to have guys to think that there's parents and coaches that are pushing kids beyond anything that's fun at that age it's kind of sickening, really, to me, because, like I said, I grew up where you just go across the street and you play for the love of the game, to go and train because you want to, not because your parents are telling you what you did wrong in the car and why didn't you score goals, and you know, at our club we're starting to incorporate where parents are kind of they just sit back and enjoy it and turn their kids over to us so we can help them grow, because really getting in the car, the worst times for kids is when they have a bad game and get in the car and the car ride home sometimes for parents, when they can be, you know, told, you know what, you can get them next time, right? Mistakes are going to be made. You didn't have a great game. But guess what? I mean, the best part about development for kids is making sure they can still have fun. Nobody knows more that they messed up than the kid themselves, right? They know that they didn't have a great
Right.
game, and they don't need to be told by even their coaches that they didn't have a great game. They know it, and I think that that's what, it goes back to that winning at all costs, because the parents can go post on Facebook or Twitter that they won the tournament, and I think the egos and from the different directors of these clubs and the business sense, I think it's wrong sometimes, but that's why we're here in Baltimore. That's why we've grown to where we've grown to in such a short period of time, with close to 50 teams, and some of the great things that we're doing with the youth kids and the 5, 6, and 7-year-old, introducing them to the game. And I think that that's the reason why we've been so successful, and everybody else around us has, in all honesty, they've crumbled in Baltimore. And we now are the elite club because of our philosophy, because of the people who run it, and because of how we interact with the kids and try to help the parents along.
Yeah, and how old did you say the club's not that old yet?
No, we're just 4 years in, bud, and we're close to 50 teams and really growing immensely. And what we provide and what we do and how we run this professional thing here is unlike anything else. And we've had to learn what works, what doesn't work. We've had to fail at things, and I think that's what's happened with myself and my partner over the last couple of years. Is we've learned what works, what doesn't work. We've learned what kids need to be successful. We've learned that creating an environment that's extremely professional and family-oriented, to where kids train together. They see the older kids, they see the younger kids. So many times you look around the country and there's no training facilities for kids. They don't get to look up to the older kids. The older kids don't get to interact with the younger ones. And I think that that's what we've created here, to where it's a real family feel. You like to wear our crest. Kids wear it to school proudly, and that's what we're extremely proud of here.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you about Pipeline Soccer and to tell us more, but I mean, we kind of just jumped into it, which is fine. What else about your club do you want to tell us, or what else is unique about it?
The club is we wanted to create something that was unlike anything else that's been created in Baltimore. We were really up against it early on because we were competing against other clubs that were touted as the top in the country and special players. But what we found out that it wasn't run the right way, and it wasn't run to our liking. You have to experience it. You have to feel as a player, as a youth player, and go up through the ranks in the national team and everything else. And I've experienced that. So I have a unique chance with my partner Sean to be able to help this game grow and to make it feel special and to make the kids love the game. And I think that that's where what we're trying to do is create a brand that the kids love to be a part of. And we don't win everything, we don't lose everything, but when we at the end of the day, we can look at ourselves in the mirror, the founders of this club, and say, we're giving them every opportunity to succeed. And I don't have a magic solution to creating 50 teams in 4 years. What I do have is the ability to make this really enjoyable for kids and to give knowledge and to build a coaching staff and group of people that are in charge of the kids that are top-notch and understand what our philosophies are. And I think that's where we've been really successful, not having parent coaches and not having, screaming on the sideline. And, of course, you're still going to have parents you have to deal with. But I think that what we put in place, the guys that are involved, it really is second to none, and it's only going to continue to grow and become more special.
Yeah. Well, I mean, congratulations, first of all, with that, and I'm sure it's going to continue doing well as long as you're there leading the charge. So the final question, Santino, that we normally ask our participants, our guests, is, again, we want to learn from your knowledge, from your experience, your journey. The question is what you would do if you had a 5-year-old, but you already have a 5-year-old. So
I do.
Tell us what your what your plan is if he does decide that he likes soccer and he wants to be involved with soccer. Well, how would you go about maximizing player development?
So as a father, with him, he obviously he loves the game, and he's very good at it. He does our rec program, our youth stuff with Pipeline. You know, for me, even last year when he was, he had the ability to play at the, in one of our under 8 teams. But I told my wife, I said, you know what, it's not the right time yet. You know, it's not the right time for him to jump into play, and he's 5 years old. He's going to have many, many years to be able to play. He has to still, he comes with me to trainings, you know, he sees how things are. It's got to be fun. It's a lot of laughing, even at trainings. So they understand at a young age that, wow, this is fun. You know, he comes with the older kids. He sees it from a player development standpoint. To hold them out, you know, till 6, 7 years old is a good thing. To not have real structured games where they're feeling a lot of pressure at 5 and 6 to win games and to score goals and to have to succeed, I think has been the best thing for him. He wants to play. There's never a time that he doesn't want to go outside and play, and he's going to have his time to play in a structured environment where he's on a team, where he's a part of it, where he's in those games. And but as a father and as somebody who's been through it, I said, you know what, it wasn't the right time yet. Let's hold him out. Let him do our programs. Let him go have fun with the. There is no team yet. You know, he gets to see his friends at these youth academy programs, and they do stuff twice a week, and you know they do some games on a weekend, but it's never any teams. There's no numbers on the back of their jerseys. It's just going out and having fun. There's no keeping score yet, and then they yearn for more, and then they're introduced to a team that will start to obviously train more consistently. They'll become more of a team, and that's where he'll be introduced to this year as he starts to grow a little bit as a player. But that's where I am with him, and if I could give any suggestions, it's really make sure that the game is absolutely fun. Make sure that they're in an environment where there's not screaming and yelling on the sideline, telling them what to do. There should be one voice, really, and that's the voice of the coach, because that's who they listen to in the end. I've played on at the top level, and even for him, he would, if there was somebody else involved in Pipeline, he would listen to him first because I'm the dad, right? I'm the father. So
yeah,
and that's what I've learned is to be supportive of whatever they feel like doing, to be supportive of what he does, whether it's good or bad. Help the kids along, and let them find their way. And if they like the game, there's obviously many, many outlets to it. If they don't like it so much, I'm not going to push.
Yeah, and you mentioned, having them yearn for more. We do want the kids to stay hungry, because with that desire, that's what's going to push them more, right?
Absolutely. If they don't have desire, if you don't have desire for anything in this world, then you're just not going to do it. And that's where I think at the younger ages, we have at Pipeline, we have great relations with these other big clubs in the these other big clubs and the EP program, and how we really change the model, what this looks like. I don't want to be on the sideline where, 7-year-old kids are being yelled at by grown men to run down the field and go score a goal so you can win. That's not what I want to be a part of, and that's where we're going to change the culture here in Baltimore and make sure that the kids are in an environment where they're being supported by their families, and if the families don't understand that, then Pipeline isn't for you, and you can go find somewhere that is. And that's why we've been so successful.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm sure with your leadership, like I said, Pipeline Soccer, and obviously your son as well, have a lot to look forward to. And Santino, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your work with Dan Cronin?
Yeah, obviously Dan Cronin is he runs the substance abuse and the policies for the Major League Soccer, for NHL, and he's a fantastic human being who's helped a lot of people. I had my struggles, 20, 21, 22 years old, with alcohol, drugs, because of these emotions and these feelings of being a young guy that was kind of on his own and introduced to a life that was, really, didn't have the I didn't have the right tools to be able to deal with that at such a young age. And Dan Cronin helped me in the end because I was on a path of destruction. And to be able to have a guy like him and even Major League Soccer support you through a really, really rough time, was special. I still talk to Dan a lot. I help a lot of kids and athletes who struggle with addiction, because I tell you, it's a lot of them, especially this day and age, where it's pain pills, it's steroids, it's so many different things that kids have access to in high schools and college. It's nice to be able to help people and to share my experiences with kids and tell them, at a young age when they're in high schools, and to be able to do these conferences and talk to kids about the dangers of alcohol, of drugs, of, performance enhancing drugs, all that stuff it's special. It's near and dear to me. And I've been sober for 7.5 years now. So, it's really, there's no other feeling like being able to help see somebody who's lost everything down and out and to find their way, find their life again and to be happy. So, everybody knows somebody that is struggling with this or needs help. So it's good to be able to help people.
Yeah. And Santino, you still work currently with Dan?
I don't work with Dan. Me and Dan are really close friends. If he ever needs me to do anything, I'll certainly help. I talk to guys if need be. I don't do day-to-day stuff with Dan, but he's somebody that he knows he could call me any time or day, and I would answer his calls, and it's reciprocated. So he's somebody I never liked before, because he was the guy who did drug testing and everything else, and we laugh about that now. I used to run away from him. Now I answer all his calls.
Yeah, and Santino, I've worked with this population as well in the past, and it does take a true champion, and it goes to show the type of person and champion that you are, because you overcame this, and I see so many people struggle with it, and they just cannot get away from it. And it does take a special person to be able, and the support too. I mean, you got to have the support, but it takes a lot of that person to be able to get away from that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It does, and like I said, it's one of those things where a lot of people struggle in this country, and it's an epidemic, and especially here in Baltimore, and everybody knows. You see the news, you see different shows. Kids with heroin addictions, and it's really sad. But I guess that's why guys like me can help kids, and hopefully, help one person. Maybe this podcast can help somebody that's listening and say, what if that guy can do it, who's down and out? Maybe I can too. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, we really appreciate you sharing something so personal, and again, just taking the time to come on here and tell us all the stories that you've been discussing with us, and just sharing your knowledge and your journey. I mean, that's so critical for parents to understand. And again, we really appreciate it. Can't thank you enough. Thank you so much, Santino.
No problem, Marissa. Thanks for having me, bud.
Thanks again for joining us, guys. Again, you can find the highlights of this interview with Santino at YouthSoccerRevolution.com. I've also included all the links to the show notes. Make sure you check out Santino's website, www.pipelinesoccerclub.com, and I'll catch you on the other side.